What's up, everybody? Today we're fighting the mud pretty bad because we've had 3 straight days of rain. One thing I took for granted over at our main yard is having full concrete, and so this is probably the worst experience we've had at the new yard since it's been open with the mud. So since it was so bad, I ran and got a few loads of crushed concrete just to keep these guys going. That way we could get trucks in here and get them loaded and get them out. But let me show you what we're working with, and then I'll show you what happens after we get the gravel spread. So you can see how terrible the mud is. This is after 3 days of rain, and they're calling for rain at least 2 more days. So we're gonna try to at least scrape some of this muck up, get down to hard ground again, and then just cover it as best we can as a temporary fix. Also, he has to get the crane in that little hole right there to be able to load the trucks, which is kind of why he's worked this pile back in sort of a weird way, like a horseshoe shape. And he's getting ready to pull back in there because he's got another truck here to load. Certainly be a lot easier if we had a track machine over here. We do have a track machine, but it's our magnet machine. So we may eventually upgrade and change machines just so we have track. So you can see now that we've got several trucks loaded out, they've been able to make a lot more room. We're just trying to take the wheel loader and scrape all the mucky stuff back before we start spreading the gravel out. That way we can at least be down to solid ground, or at least partially. And then of course there's a little bit of metal in that dirt that he's pushing up. We'll use the magnet and get all of that out. Hopefully we've got enough gravel now with these 3 loads to cover this pad right here so that we can continue to get trucks in here and get this stuff loaded out. Because once we get all of these piles moved, we actually want to move the piles back so we have more room. So this is a couple different size materials that we picked up. This is going to work well for a base because it's a little bit bigger and has less fines in it. And then sort of to fill some of the holes, I got some of this material that they actually screened out before they run it through the crusher. And you can see there's some basketball or football size chunks in there. So we'll put this in any of the low spots and sort of run over it with that track machine to kind of break down those big chunks and pack those holes in. Then we'll put that little bit larger material to form a good base, and then we'll top it all off with some more finer, normal gravel size material. Well, it's been about 3 or 4 days since we had all that rain, which caused the big mud problems, but it did rain a little bit this morning. But as a backhaul from the steel mill, we're bringing back this fine slag, and we're putting this down pretty much across the whole yard. It makes for a pretty good road, and it seems to be packing down pretty well. Let me take you over to the yard and show you. So as you guys saw it yesterday, the entire yard was a soupy mess like this. So basically we're just taking the loader and the skid steer and back dragging all this really wet, nasty mud off the top, and then just spreading this fine slag all across the yard. That first pile I showed you, I got dumped outside the gate just as an extra pile, and I'm just dumping piles every so often around the yard so that we can just spread it. Biggest goal was to just get a nice road or a path for all the customers to stay on. But you can see right off the edge is this nasty orange wet mess. But unfortunately we haven't had a choice but to drop scrap on top of it. So this weekend plan is to bring the crane over here and just move all this material back and get all this scraped up and cleaned up, and just keep putting fresh gravel down. Over here is where we're going to put that big concrete base, so the bigger material, about fist size or so, and then we'll put the fines on top of it just so it really packs in there and has a solid base. Well, I'm over here on Saturday finally trying to finish this mud problem once and for all. Of course, it's been not a very easy process this morning. Pretty much every piece of equipment had dead batteries. I got them all started now, but you can see I got these two backed up to each other because the loader was dead and I had to use that magnet crane to jump it off. But we finally had 4 or 5 days of sun with no rain. And pretty much everything has dried out for the most part, except for these really deep, bad, muddy spots. This spot right here, I'm going to bring the magnet up and get all the steel and small pieces out of it before I scrape the mud back. Then while I was waiting for the loader to dry, I went ahead and took jump before, well, dead batteries. I went ahead and took the skid steer and scraped this back, so you can see I got it back down to hard ground. It kind of looks soupy like that over there. And then I'm just taking this big stone and dropping it in. The loader started now, so now I'll be able to do this a lot faster because I can get big scoops. But I'm just gonna put a good, 4 or 5 inch layer of that big stone, and then I'm gonna take some of this small stuff and put on top of it as well. And I'm basically just gonna work my way all the way around this pile, and then I'm gonna load this pile into a trailer and keep working the pile back. So basically from that stack of cars all the way down in front of that stack of steel down there will be all fresh gravel, nice and level and packed down. That way customers, when they come in, they don't have to drive into this mud. And really, we haven't been asking them to drive in the mud. We've been having them drive up here on this fine stuff, and then they'll throw their scrap out right here on the ground in front of us. But then it makes more of a challenge for us, because really we want to be able to stack this material back as far as we can as it comes in, or we end up in the same situation like we were a month ago when our machines broke down, and this pile will be stretched all the way across the yard out there to the gate almost. But yeah, so when I got here this morning, I needed the grapple crane so I could start loading the trailer. It was dead, so I brought the magnet crane over and jumped it off. And then I knew I was going to need the wheel loader with the bucket on it, so I went to start it and it was dead. And that loader with the forks was backed up next to it, so I went to start it so I could jump it using that, and it was dead. So I had to move the magnet crane back over there, hook to the loader with the forks, get it running. Then I moved it out of the way, and then I hooked it to the loader with the bucket and let it charge for about 15 minutes, and now it started. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I'm gonna work at it here for a little while, trying to get this stuff packed in pretty good, and I'll be back with an update when I get done shortly. that gives you a pretty good idea of what I'm going for. I don't really have a roller or anything to kind of pack it down, so I'll probably just take this machine and drive it back and forth, get it sort of smoothed out, and then go back with some fine stuff just to kind of fill in all the gaps on the big rock. But I would not have been able to drive that crane right there into that orange mud before I put this down. That thing with those slick rubber tires just spins as soon as it gets in it. So basically, that's definitely working really well. But if I were to try to drive it over here, I'd be stuck instantly. So I'm gonna go ahead and load this pile of stuff out. That way I can keep working this pile back without having to spread basically all this mud onto the gravel I just put down. So once I get this gone, my plan is to come in from the side and basically push all that dirt over there into a pile in front of those cars. That way it's not getting into our steel piles, and we can come back later and clean it up and screen the dirt and all that good stuff. And then we should be pretty well clear to spread the rest of that big rock over here, and we'll be in a lot better shape. Well, unfortunately my camera died, but I did get the trailer loaded with the material that was sitting right here pretty close. And then I went ahead and scraped everything back. I got it scraped back enough to where I was able to get the crane back in here next to these cars, and I was able to stack them up a little bit nicer and neater. That way I could continue to work on the mud. And then I took the loader and just spread as much of this big stuff as I could. Obviously I'm not a very great loader operator because this isn't very smooth, but my plan is now, because it's getting kind of late after getting held up with having to jump everything off and all that, I'm just going to let this dry out for a couple more days. This low spot right here before the pile was still holding some water, so this is all pretty wet. So on Monday I'm going to bring in another load of this big stuff and hopefully dump it right there in that low spot, and then just spread it out towards the pile. And then we'll come back on top of all this with the fine stuff to fill in all the gaps. But before I do that, I want to take either that machine over there with the tracks, or the loader, or the grapple crane, one of them, and just run over this back and forth and try to smooth it out and pack it down. That way if there's any low spots, I can get some more big rock in there before I put the fine stuff. Well, that's pretty much it for today. I know this probably isn't the most exciting content in the world. This is just one of those scenarios of something that we had to learn kind of by trial and error. Our other yard is all concrete, so we've never had to experience terrible mud like that. I definitely learned a couple lessons. The first lesson is, if we're having 4 days of rain, just cancel any trucks. Even if we're behind on shipping, it's not worth the next week or 2 weeks of fighting the mud tracked all across the yard. So we're going to finish this up. I'm going to work these piles back. We're actually going to rearrange this yard, and then I'm going to look into talking to some of the local concrete companies about getting either their washout material or their overflow at either a free or reduced rate. And then hopefully we can start getting some concrete down on this yard, and then we won't have to deal with this anymore. But as always, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment down below of some other stuff you'd like to see around the scrapyard, and I'll do my best to get to it.